Joining us now, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Senator, what questions do you have, especially in light of this new information, the revelations about the second previously undisclosed meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin?
So I worry that we risk losing a little bit of perspective on some of the watershed moments here by reacting with equal outrage to every revelation. So yes, the president or the administration should have disclosed this meeting at the G20, but it was in a public setting with a whole bunch of other G20 leaders. The watershed moment here is, of course, the Donald Trump Jr. meeting, which may be the fire underneath all the smoke that we've been waiting for. But I think there's a little bit of a sort of perpetual motion machine now to react with equal outrage to every daily revelation. I'm not as worried about the G20 meeting as I am about the inability to get the full truth on the Donald Trump Jr. meeting, and I think we have to focus there on the meeting that probably is most problematic and most key to understanding the full potential collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government.
Senator, it is important to keep things in their proper context, which you are obviously doing in looking at those two different incidences. That said, how unusual is it for a United States president to have 3 hours of meetings with an adversary of the United States, with an adversary who sees the United States as their enemy, and have 3 hours worth of meetings without a single national security staff member around them?
It's especially concerning because, you know, we're pretty sure at this point that Donald Trump doesn't know the book of business that he's talking with Putin. He seems woefully undereducated about the major national security challenges that are presented. He seems to, you know, go prevaricate back and forth on U.S. policy towards Russia on an hourly basis, the most recent example being the suggestion that the United States should be in deep cooperation with the Russians about cyber security and election security, pivoting back to our original position of being careful about that an hour later. I mean, I think we should all be very worried that the president is engaged in these deep one-on-one talks with Vladimir Putin without any professional staff around, given the fact that it's clear at this point that the president has not done enough study in order to, you know, talk with Putin on equal footing.
Senator Sam Stein here. I want to switch to domestic politics. What we're going to likely see in the next day, week, whatever, is that a repeal and replace, or rather I should say a repeal-only effort will fail in the Senate. And the question that we've all had is what comes next? As a Democrat who fought this, are you now ready at that point to sit down with Republicans? And if so, where do you see the areas of agreement, and what kind of concessions could you make in order to get things like reinsurance and reinsurance and some of these cost-sharing subsidies?
So I'm very ready, and as Tim Kaine noted earlier, we've been ready since the very beginning. We've made known our desire to sit down with Republicans. Now, you're right. There have to be some parameters around those negotiations. I'm not interested in gutting Medicaid. I'm not interested in passing major new tax cuts for the rich. But I do think that there's a dialogue to be had about preserving what works in the ACA and fixing what needs improvement. So let me give you a perfect example of that. Republicans want more flexibility in these exchanges. They perhaps want a new plan to be offered that has lower premiums. I'm willing to talk to them about that as long as they're willing to talk to us about taking away from President Trump some of the discretion he has now to undermine the Affordable Care Act. He's telegraphed that he wants to tear it apart, and we probably need to do some things to stabilize it. So there's a conversation to be had, but we all have to be working towards the same goal, which is lower costs and more people, not less people, being enrolled in insurance in this country. I'm skeptical that Mitch McConnell's ready to do that. I worry that they're going to go back behind closed doors and try to work out version 6.0. But there's a lot of Democrats, even progressive Democrats like me, that are willing to compromise with these guys.
Senator, you're a thoughtful guy, so I'm wondering, are you worried that the Trump presidency has changed the definition, the nature, the impression of the presidency around the globe and here at home?
I worry that this is a pivotal moment for U.S. reputation and power in the world, and that's exclusive of the Trump presidency. You're just at a moment today where it's not a bipolar world any longer. If you're a free agent, you have a lot of suitors for your affection. It's not just Russia and the United States, it's China, it's Brazil. There's a lot of people who are out there trying to exert power, and so it's a lot easier today to walk away from a relationship with the United States. So as you see this massive withdrawal from the world, this purposeful deconstruction of the State Department, I don't know that we're going to be able to get that influence back 3.5 years from now. So I think there is some permanent damage that's done to the United States, the influence we exert. And what we thought was this inexorable march towards participatory democracies and open economies, well, there's a boomerang happening in many places. And without U.S. leadership, we can't model democracy. There's no other country that can do it for us. So, yeah, I worry that we're not going to get this influence back now that we've lost so much of it in a very short period of time.
All right, Senator Chris Murphy, thank you so much for being on the show today. And coming
All right, thanks,
up,
guys.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.